battled Atlanta Hawks general manager Danny Ferry and said he respected and appreciated Ferry's apology. Just had a heart-to-heart meeting with Hawks GM Danny Ferry. He apologized for his comments about Luol Deng and the African-American community. In our meeting, Danny Ferry's apology was very sincere. I have a lot of respect for Danny because he called and wanted to talk about how his comments offended so many people. After our long meeting, I think he deserves a second chance, whether it's with the Hawks or another team. Ferry currently is on an indefinite leave of absence from the Hawks after his inflammatory remarks about the then free agent Luol Deng were made public in August. Magic also tweeted advice to the Hawks CEO Steve Koonin that the team should hire Dominique Wilkins as a high-level executive. All right, Stephen A. Magic received a call from Danny Ferry, from my understanding, because he wanted to explain his side of the story. Magic, after the phone call, gives his quote-unquote blessing. So my question for you is, how much of an impact will that have?
I don't know if it'll have much of an impact in Atlanta, but I do think it should have a profound impact league-wide as it pertains to the hireability, for lack of a better word, of Danny Ferry. Danny Ferry should not be condemned or put into some kind of purgatory where he's deemed unhireable. He should not be an individual that's labeled a racist, and because of that, he can't get an executive position in the NBA. You know, I've spoken to Danny Ferry. I've spoken to Billy King, the general manager for the Brooklyn Nets, who played with Danny Ferry at Duke, who recruited Danny Ferry to come to Duke with him, who's been his best friend since they were 15 years of age, who vouches for him big time. I've spoken to numerous players who played under Danny Ferry, who happened to be black, while Danny Ferry was an executive in Cleveland. I spoke to the camp of LeBron James when there was rumors out there where people were saying that he had a problem with Danny Ferry, only to hear from LeBron James camp that they had absolutely no problem with Danny Ferry. In the interest of fairness, and that's what we're talking about here, to label Danny Ferry in this way, I think is cruel and irresponsible. However, Danny Ferry to some degree assisted in bringing that upon himself by reading the email or the scouting report that he did about Luol Deng without editing out those comments that were so offensive. And as a result, even though he shouldn't be labeled a racist and he shouldn't be refrained from receiving another job as an executive in the NBA, in the city of Atlanta, Magic Johnson and others are going to have to respect that they do have the right to feel like he's not the guy they want. Because the one thing that comes out about Magic Johnson's tweets, Skip Bayless, and he may not know this because he's not an NBA insider, even though he has profound contacts, and Magic Johnson is as conscientious a brother as they are. The bottom line is that Danny Ferry's relationship with Dominique Wilkins, from what I'm told, wasn't always the greatest. Danny Ferry came in there destined to carry out Barry Levinson's, the owner that's walking away from it because of his incendiary email or what people perceive to be incendiary. This guy came in there with a mandate from Levinson to change the culture. And one of the things that Danny Ferry didn't do, that I don't believe was very smart of him, is that he didn't ingratiate himself with Dominique Wilkins. Dominique Wilkins wasn't nearly as included in the decision-making process as he was before Danny Ferry arrived. Had Danny Ferry ingratiated himself more and valued Dominique Wilkins more, then perhaps he would not be in this situation as we speak. So I definitely found it interesting that Magic Johnson put the tweet out that he put about Dominique Wilkins, because if Dominique Wilkins is going to be in an elevated position in terms of basketball operations, he doesn't need to be working in concert with Danny Ferry, because when Danny Ferry had the opportunity to do that, he didn't take full advantage of it. But in no way does that mean that Danny Ferry should be ostracized and that Danny Ferry shouldn't get another executive position in the NBA. I just don't believe it should be in Atlanta any longer.
Okay. I'm enlightened by a number of things you said, and I want to point out to our viewers, you said this from the very start because you had talked to many, many sources, maybe not Magic, but many sources who said, no, Danny Ferry is not a racist and he should not be ostracized. You said it from the first day we tackled this topic. And obviously, Magic Johnson's voice resonates, it reverberates around this country when it comes to these kind of issues. That was a powerful endorsement.
Right.
Because Magic went so far as to say that he wouldn't mind, I'm paraphrasing the tweet, but that he wouldn't even mind it if Danny Ferry returned to the Atlanta Hawks. While there are many people, as we know, we've talked about in Atlanta, who would not love that. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you one more time to help me through one point here that sticks in my craw. Talk me through this. I'm with you that Danny Ferry should not be labeled a lifelong racist and never have a shot at another job in the NBA. I get all that. But I read multiple reports last night that the NBA is not pursuing its investigation of where this phrase came from and why it was in the scouting report and what was the origin of this phrase that Luol Deng, as we know, has a little African in him. That little bit of analysis that Danny Ferry read on the conference call to his many minority investors. Why would the NBA push that on the back burner, if not sweep it under the carpet? Because it still troubles me where it came from and why Danny Ferry would think it would be okay to read that phrase that he had gleaned, as I get this, from a source in another team's front office. Am I right about that?
Well, first of all, the other team's front office was Cleveland.
Okay.
Secondly, the NBA knows full well who the scouting report was from. They know who wrote that. They have it. Okay? Just because they didn't advertise it to all of us doesn't mean that they don't know and doesn't mean that the matter has been dealt with. And when you consider that we're fresh off the whole Donald Sterling fiasco and how that threatened to sully the brand, from a sheer business perspective, we can understand that while the NBA has no doubt handled this matter, that they're not interested in publicizing it and addressing it in a public forum and making it or contributing to the news headlines out there because it compromises the bottom line. Let's not act like we're oblivious or ignorant to business practices. You're going to do what you need to do to protect your bottom line as best as you possibly can, particularly if you know that from an insulated perspective, you are addressing the matter and you've addressed it expeditiously. So on that level, I definitely understand where you're coming from, but I understand that the NBA knows who wrote what they wrote, knows where the scouting report came from, and knows that and obviously that they're dealing with it. In the case of Danny Ferry, excuse me, he's simply somebody that made a mistake. And the folks who are black that are out there, and some white folks that want Danny Ferry. I mean, you got owners in Atlanta that want Danny Ferry gone. They have their reasons, and their reasons are valid. I'm not in any way trying to say that the minority owners in the mix don't have legitimate reasons for wanting Danny Ferry out of Atlanta. Yeah. But it shouldn't be, number one, that he's a racist. And number two, it shouldn't be this seemingly clandestine but yet public campaign to label him a racist in order to get rid of him. And that's why the quotes from Magic Johnson are powerful, because it's about fairness. And that's what we're talking about. Okay. And the NBA is sensitive to that as well.
Last thought on this. I appreciate, bless you, I appreciate what you're saying about the NBA trying to keep an internal investigation internal, keep it out of the public spotlight. But there's quite another matter called public trust in the wake of the Donald Sterling incident issue that I'd like to know a little more. Help me out here. You know, tell me, NBA, what happened? What are you doing about this?
But the problem with you wanting to know more is that they're not going to have the luxury of dealing with Danny Ferry and the isolated incidents involving the Atlanta Hawks, the scouting report, the emails, etc. Everything is going to be lumped into the bowl created by Donald Sterling. And that's what they're trying to get beyond. And I can't blame them for that.
All right. You leave it there? You have something else to say?
No, I don't. But I'm not satisfied.
You're not satisfied.
I'm waiting and seeing.
You never are.
This is, well, you know what? That's a good point. Quiet.